their share, because they don't have insurance themselves, so I think they do Tim their share.
Good evening. Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody in the room, and to those of you who are joining us online this evening. My name is Elizabeth McCrum. I'm a Pro Vice Chancellor here for Education and Student Experience, but I'm here this evening in my capacity as a sex equality champion for the University Executive Board. This is an important event this evening. It's one of a series of events that we host across the year that celebrates equality, diversity and inclusion at Reading. This particular event is part of Women's History Month. March the 8th was International Women's Day, and the theme for 2025 for the campaign was Accelerate Action. According to the World Economic Forum, at the current rate of progress, it will take until 2158 until we have gender parity. That is 5 generations. So there's certainly a need to accelerate action. There is a need to increase urgency and momentum in terms of taking down the barriers to equality for women, both in personal and professional spheres. And there's plenty of things that we can do in order to take us forward in that aim. For all of us, we can support initiatives locally, nationally, internationally, with whatever we have, whether it's our time, our advocacy, our resources. All of us can call out stereotyping, we can challenge discrimination, and we can question biases. And importantly, we can celebrate women's successes. And that's very much what we intend to do this evening. But more of that anon. The first International Women's Day was held in March 1911. And at that time, Edith Morley, in whose honour we hold this event, was Professor of English Language here at the University of Reading. Edith was the first female professor in the country, and it's in her honour that this building is named. But Edith was also a sportswoman at a time when, in her own words, women were perpetually instructed that women's bodies were not adapted by nature to strenuous exertion. She was a keen cyclist, but when her uncle gave her a bicycle for her 21st birthday, her father sought a medical opinion before he allowed her to ride it. And Edith saw the bicycle as a symbol of freedom and emancipation, an escape from chaperonage. She was also a hockey player. She played for the first 11 of the King's College Club, one of the earliest London hockey clubs for women, and in 1901 was a member of the first English women's hockey team to play in Holland. Not an official international match, but one that was attended by Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands. What is less well known about Morley is that she was also a scholar. From 1904 to 1907, she was secretary of the Women's Sculling at University College Reading, and she was a founder member of the club. Her regular reports to the college magazine chart the ups and downs of women's sculling during this period of time. It seems that compared with men's rowing at Reading, women's sculling was a more leisurely activity. In a spring issue of 1904, she noted that regular practices will begin as soon as swimming tests have been surmounted, and schemes for picnics and river parties are also under discussion. In the next issue, however, she threatens that there has been so much slackness about submitting for swimming tests that the captain is beginning to have doubts whether the proposed picnic will be able to take place this term. Reports of men's rowing, by contrast, concentrate on the names and weights of crews, training sessions, techniques, and the results of competitions. There isn't any mention of swimming tests. In 1917, W.M. Childs, who was the first principal, vice Chancellor of the University of Reading, became very worried about women racing in boats. So he set up a committee of inquiry in which Edith was included. He even sent a questionnaire to other vice-chancellors to ask their opinion of the practice, and they were split for positive and for negative, and we don't know the results, but we suspect it was negative because the issue was returned to again in 1921, where there was a positive outcome subject to a number of conditions. So Edith was a formidable woman. She was a formidable academic presence at our institution. She held very strong beliefs about the place of women in society and in the academy. So it is apt that this evening, in her name and spirit, we celebrate our lead speaker and University of Reading alumni, Mathilda Hodgkins-Byrne. Mathilda is an accomplished rower. She began rowing in 2011 at the Hereford Rowing Club and progressed to the GB Start programme in Reading, making her GB rowing debut in 2012. If I get any of this wrong, she'll tell you in a minute. So, Mathilda balanced her chemistry degree at Reading with competing at an elite level, graduating in 2019, the same year as qualifying for the Tokyo Olympics. So if there are students in the room, no pressure. At the delayed Tokyo 2020 Games, she finished 7th in the women's quadruple sculls. After welcoming her son Freddie in 2022, Mathilda returned to rowing, proving that motherhood and elite sport can coexist. In 2024, she secured Olympic qualification and won bronze at the Paris Olympics. There is a medal in the room. She cemented her legacy as an inspiring athlete and mother. She's kindly agreed to talk to you this evening and to take your questions. If you are in the room, there will be an opportunity for you to raise your hand and have a microphone and ask your questions. If you are joining us online, please pop your questions in the chat. But without further ado, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Mathilda.
Thank you so much for that. So my story I'm going to talk about is from when I first started and how it got me to my medal this summer. The title I chose tonight was "It Took a Village," because though I'm one person standing in front of you, it was certainly not one person that enabled this story to happen. For me, returning after Tokyo, after having Freddie, my aim was a medal. There was no other chance with it. But to understand why this was my goal, I must rewind back to the beginning where it all started. To be honest, before I even really knew what the Olympics was, and I was just a teenager with the mindset of, why not me? This was me when I lived in Sussex. I'm about age 7, and to be honest, that was me through and through. Every aim, every ambition was, I wanted to become a lady sheep farmer or a lady chicken farmer, depending on which animal I had at the time. There's a statement, did rowing find you or did you find rowing? Honestly, for me, I'm not sure. If you talk to my mother, if you talk to my sister, I didn't like sports. To be honest, I still don't. I wasn't sporty in the slightest. I'd had no intention of ever becoming an Olympian. Like I said, I didn't even know what the Olympics were. People asked me, did I watch 2012? It might have been on a very broken TV at the time, but I distinctively remember going sailing and not having a clue that really the Olympics were just down the road from me. When I took up rowing, I took it up because I was looking for this sport, my PE option, that was going to take the least physical exertion. In my mind, it was big wooden rowing boats going very slowly, leisurely down the river, absolutely no effort involved. Quite quickly, I realized I was very wrong. However, by that point, I was really very hooked. And I carried on with this naivety of, why not me? A coach stood up and told us that there was a thing called GB rowing trials. I volunteered myself for this. I've been in the boat 2 times. Realistically, not looking profitable. But fast forward a year and I'd achieved my first international selection and I was going to Hartbury Rowing College to complete my A-levels. While I was at Hartbury, Sam Townsend, also alumni from here and double Olympian, came to speak to us about rowing and to explain that he was coaching at Reading University. Though a career in sport was not something I'd ever considered, again, my mantra of, why not? Why couldn't I do this? It hooked me. And he'd shown me how he'd done it. He'd gone through being a student and he'd made it possible. And he was standing there in front of us as an Olympian. I was able to see how this jump was possible, and I wanted to see if I could do it. And for me, my mantra has always been, I wanted to be in charge of my story. I wanted to be the person at the centre of it. And I also wanted to be its author. So this seemed like a great opportunity. For me, looking back, how I operated on my career, that was really my driver. It was control the controllables, but ultimately see if luck and fate would let me be in the right position. I remember ringing my mother and telling her that I was not going to go to Oxbridge. She was not pleased. And then also subsequently rejecting Durham and Imperial and subsequently coming to Reading, and thus changing my career path to try and become an Olympian. As a student in 2016, I was given my first opportunity to race as a senior and to try and qualify the single for Rio. While this was drastically way beyond my capabilities, it did give me a taste of the Olympic qualification regatta. And though in 2016, I was going there for a bit of fun to support the team, I had no idea until this summer quite how valuable this experience would be. And actually, that was probably the reason I was able to qualify this summer. But through the support of the university, I was able to do this. And without the university, none of this was going to have been possible. I learned so much about the importance of a team and the communication. I distinctly remember being at Reading Rowing Club and my weights coach, who was also my rowing coach, picking up his phone and saying, "Hello, Russell." And I realizing at that point, it was one of my lecturers ringing to find out why was I not in my chemistry lecture and where was I? My coach was very firmly gesticulating, be like, "I thought you said you had the morning off." And I was there backtracking, figuring out what excuse I could come up with and realizing, really, I actually had nothing. Following the phone call, he sat me down and told me my only option was to either start studying and therefore I could row, or I wasn't going to be allowed to row. So that quite quickly set me on my pace. And that, to be honest, was really what set me off the right way. Without these conversations, without this support, it wouldn't have been possible for me to do this. And it made me realize that actually as an athlete, I'm far more successful when I'm also doing something. And that for me was studying. I realized I had to go and have conversations with my lecturers. I had to explain that for me, I wanted to be an Olympian, but I also really did actually want my chemistry degree. And I was incredibly lucky, and the university allowed me to go part-time. And I can honestly say without that, none of this would have been possible. After my first year, I went part-time, and though it did take me 5 years to graduate, without this seemingly small change, I doubt I would have been able to support myself financially, as my university gave me the ability to stay in Reading and also row, something which, unless you have a job full-time, is really not possible. And I can certainly say, without this, I never would have made the senior team. I wouldn't have raced at 2 Olympics, and I definitely wouldn't have won a bronze medal last summer. Fast forward to 2019, and I was graduating with a 2-1, and later that summer, I would also qualify for my first Olympics. From the high in 2019, COVID came and went, and in 2021, I was selected for the Tokyo Olympics alongside my sister in the quad. And this is us in Tokyo. Tokyo was a complete disaster. We went in there thinking we'd win a medal. We walked away with 7th. We didn't even make the A final. And to be honest, it was probably the first time my chronic optimism of if I put enough in, I would get the results I was due didn't happen. And I was left questioning what was next for me. Shortly after Tokyo, I found out I was pregnant. This was a complete curveball. It hadn't been something that was in my very set plan, but it gave me the break I needed from the disaster of Tokyo. But it also really highlighted to me how unpredictable life can be. And sometimes simply it's down to luck and fate. I was then less questioning, do I carry on rowing? Do I stop? No one before had ever trained full-time with the senior team and carried on and gone back to the Olympics. So I decided, why not? Why not me? Let's see if it's possible. Andy, our head coach, would repeatedly say, hope is not a strategy. But for me, at times, this was literally all I had to cling to. Following Freddie's birth in July 22, I was really keen to return to training, but I was sat down and told that I couldn't have my son in the training centre, and I therefore didn't have any venue to train. I was incredibly lucky. Fate intervened and a local rowing club allowed me to bring Freddie along to the gym, which he now still goes age 2. He's a bit more dangerous now as he does try and lift weights, but he kept me company the whole time. And being able to train at Upper Thames meant that I could just turn up as and when I wanted, around nap times, around feeds, and I could train alongside Freddie. And without all the support and encouragement of the club members, I wouldn't have got there. And a year later, I was able to race at my first international race, less than a year after Freddie was born. And that was Freddie when I won. Fate and luck have continued to be part of my Olympiad. When I joined back in 2023, I was told that the quad, the boat I was going for, was not going to be open for selection. And therefore, my only chance of going to the Olympics was going to be in a double, which had not qualified. I should also say that typically GB does not qualify boats at the final qualification regatta. And like I said, I'd already been there and I was there with 3 other boats and none of them qualified. So the chances I knew at this point were very slim of me even going to the Olympics, but this was my only option. On the day of testing, the girl I was meant to be doing the double with became ill and fate intervened. And Becky, my doubles, who was going to become my doubles partner, jumped into the boat and the boat clicked. Having been selected in March, we were hit by a string of bad luck. Becky damaged her rib and then subsequently her wrist. This meant that we had no prep going to the European Championships. And as a result, Europeans were a complete disaster. And there was a massive gap between us and the next boat. We came 7th and the boats we needed to beat to qualify were 2nd and 3rd. We weren't even in the right final. We weren't even competitive. It was honestly terrible. We were also subsequently told that our performance at Europeans was going to be our qualifying and justification to go to the final qualification regatta. So even the ability to now qualify looked very slim. They justified sending us, saying that Becky was a development athlete. And we had 3 weeks to turn the result around. But in Becky and my style, 3 weeks turned to 10 days as Becky now had to have a wrist injection. We'd known the double was very fast in its initial testing, which gave us hope. But as I'd said before, hope's not a strategy. And we knew we were backed into a corner. Becky, Tom and I, who was our coach, became absolutely determined to leave no stone unturned, look for 1% in every single session. We were going to turn up at the Olympic qualification regatta, knowing that we'd done every single thing possible to close the margin. We qualified, we came 2nd. That could have been our season highlight, but both of us had been given a glimpse of what we were capable of, and we were absolutely determined to make it a stepping stone to an even greater goal. Becky and I were very, very fortunate in the fact that Team GB through the last Olympiad had a lightweight double of Imogen and Emily, who had been world champions at every single event. And we were given the opportunity to train alongside them. We knew that if we could catch them on speed, something no heavyweight boat had been able to do that Olympiad, we would be in a good chance of being within the top 4. We had nothing to lose. We were ranked bottom in the GB team and internationally in the women's double. However, with the lightweights, we put everything into every single session. We had our pride, but that was really nothing else. And this team we were part of, Team GB, medals were the norm. We were going in as a bottom-ranked boat who qualified at the Olympic qualification regatta. But to them, everyone won medals. It had gone from a highly unsuccessful team in Tokyo to now, if you walked away without a medal from a competition, you were the odd one out. And we were absolutely determined to become the norm. We were very fortunate. We were able to speak to Imogen and Emily, and they highlighted to us not only the importance of the training for a double, which they knew inside out, but also the importance of a support network, because in a double, if something doesn't work, there's only one other person to turn to. And actually, this could become a really intense environment very quickly. And so because of that, we were able to offload onto a bigger support network around us, be that friends or family. And I really do think that made a huge difference to us. This is us at Olympic qualification regatta. Freddie was very lucky, was able to travel with me through all the competitions. And I remember boating, and there was a Swiss girl with her niece there. And I remember thinking, it's okay. In 45 minutes, I'll see Freddie. And he would come with us for our cool-down walk. So even after our heat, when the result wasn't what we wanted, there was always this little person that he was completely oblivious to the result. He didn't care. He just had Mummy and Becky back. And as with most things that are incredibly intense, to find breathing space from it is incredibly hard. And that's what Freddie offered me. I remember thinking going into the Olympic Games, how bad can it be compared to qualifiers? We knew we had the trump card. We'd just been to Olympic qualification. There was only one other boat in our event that had done that. We knew our strategies. I had Freddie. This complete bundle of absolute carnage was going to be the most important thing in keeping me sane. He had no idea. I just had to be his mum. And whatever happened to me, my life would carry on. And in understanding this, it gave me the freedom to perform and just take the risks that I needed to make this boat succeed. Paris, well, it's a regatta, but ultimately it's the luck of the draw. This draw is picked pretty much at random. For our first race, we had America, New Zealand, Netherlands, and Italy. Going off the results of the previous season, America were meant to be one of the top crews. I remember sitting on the start line thinking that if we qualified through, amazing, but we hadn't raced anyone in this race before, so who knew what was going to happen? The buzzer went and off we went. I have no idea where our start came from. We hadn't shown it in training. We were normally led by other people and we had to claw back. We blasted out the blocks. And I remember thinking, just keep going. They're going to catch you really quickly. The whole field's going to reel you in. And then it got further down. And then I think 7:50 to go, really like, well, what happens now? We're still in qualification. And to be fair, the wheels came off the boat a bit at that point because we didn't have enough experience and we were caught off guard. But we did qualify and we qualified through in second. I remember being incredibly relieved that we hadn't been eliminated, as coming second, worst case, we were going to be in the B final. And that morning, though friends had really meant to support me, they told me they had tickets for finals day. However, if I was going to be eliminated, they were going to come to Paris to watch an event that I was now no longer part. So I was really very relieved that they weren't going to be comforting me, shaking in a corner, absolutely demoralised by this terrible Olympics. Like life's biggest moments, the majority of the week passed in a blur. I remember flashes of colour and a blur of noise interjected by the most vivid memories. And one of the biggest memories I remember is reading what my semi-final was going to be. To be honest, we were so elated after our semi, we felt we could do anything. I realised this wasn't as concrete an emotion as I thought it was when, opening the semi-final draw, my elation turned to absolute horror. Going into the regatta, you predict what crews are going to go into which races, and our semi-final draw was what we expected for the final. It was not what we expected for the semi-final. These were crews who, there was no way in hell I thought we could beat them. I was, at that point, pretty much adamant we were going to end up in the B final. It was us, Norwegians, they'd won the European Championships, the Romanians, previous Olympic champions, Australia, who'd won multiple World Championship medals, China, who are always rookie. They're either incredible or terrible. You can't rule them out. And then, again, America. Though they'd crashed out in the first race, we would be foolish to rule them out. I'm pretty certain neither Becky or I slept much that night, and we were certainly awake from 2 a.m. because I could hear her moving around in her bed and she could hear me. I remember trying to take bicarb before the race, and that felt near impossible, gagging on my caffeine before the race. Control the controllables. That was our aim. Whatever happened would happen, but we were going to do everything possible to put ourselves in the best position. We knew in the back of our minds the Aussie double. One of the girls, though she'd historically always won medals throughout the season, whenever it came to World Championships or an Olympics, she was somehow unable to make the A final. But hoping this would happen again, it's not a strategy and it's not something we could hope. Equally, there was multiple other crews in that event that we couldn't hope that they made a mistake. I can honestly say I don't really remember much of that race. I knew we somehow led until the last 150 metres and we somehow crossed the line in second. The Romanians pipped us, but they went crazy in the last bit and they had a ranking on their back. This was really not something we'd expected. The reality check when we crossed the finish line, we were no longer the 13th ranked crew in the field. And now the reality dawned on us that if we left this regatta with anything but a medal, it was not going to be good enough. The day of our final arrived, and to be honest, neither Becky or I felt very good. Becky, unbeknownst to me, had a cold, and I, unbeknownst to Becky, had not been in the crew room the night before having a chat with someone. I'd been waiting for anaesthetic patches to be delivered from the village as I'd fractured my rib during the competition. But these weren't controllable, and neither of us acknowledged them to each other. I remember one of the coaches repeatedly saying to us, you have to be good enough on your worst day. And it kept going through my head. Well, if this was my worst day, I was going to be good enough. Was it fate? But I also remembered Andy, our head coach, saying, there's always one crew who goes through the Olympic qualification regatta who wins a medal. And it just kept coming through my mind. I was going to be that crew. The final race, I remember sitting on the start line. You're held for about 5 minutes. I remember talking to Becky. In my head, I was trying to comfort her, but actually I was really just encouraging myself because I didn't know what to think. Squeeze the blades, try and stay present. You're desperately trying to distract yourself from the unknown of what's going to happen once you cross the finish line. Try as much as you want to distract yourself. That's all you can think about. The gun went. I remember getting off the start and thinking, this was the first time in this regatta our start had actually felt terrible. To be honest, probably more what we'd done in training. And it didn't feel right for the first 400 meters. We got it back together by this point, but we weren't leading the field like we'd done in every other race. And it cost us a lot more than it had done previously to get us into this position. But 750 meters to go, I knew we were in bronze. And I knew, therefore, all we had to do was keep putting in what we were putting in every stroke, and we would cross the line in bronze. Looking over, I could see the Dutch. They were charging down to us. But looking ahead of me at Becky, I could see her forearm was starting to fail because her wrist injury, though it had been injected, was really not healed at all. I knew from my judgment and my experience that making Becky sprint was more likely to trip us up and cost us the medal, whereas I could see the Dutch weren't moving quite as quickly as they'd wished. I told Becky we were in middle position, and with that, we just inched towards the line. We crossed the line as Olympic bronze medalist. And for the first time, Becky didn't believe me when I told her. This girl had believed and trusted me with everything that I told her throughout the regatta. But it took for it going up on the scoreboard for her to turn around and be like, oh my God, we won bronze. I was like, yes, I've already told you that. For me, it was a weird sensation. I'd spent pretty much all of my career believing I could. This girl, when she first started out, thinking that 85 scullers were going to be selected as a junior. Of course they weren't. There weren't 85 seats, but this naivety and this innocence had driven me throughout my career. But this relief that me thinking and feeling I was good enough had happened, and I was able to prove I was good enough. And I finally was proud of my athletic career. As a team of 3, Tom, Becky, and I, we had known what we were capable of, but it had taken 5 pieces of fate and luck to bring us together. I had my high standards of Tokyo and had failed, but I'd become pregnant and decided to become the first woman to remain full-time training with the Team GB, and subsequently I was now the first mother from Team GB to ever win an Olympic medal. Becky joined the squad after major forearm surgery and should never have been considered, but other athletes being ill meant that she was given her chance. The luck of my coach, Tom, was actually my coach at Hartbury and my first international coach, becoming my Olympic coach and being able to bring his expertise and guidance to our project. The learning curve of failing to perform at Europeans really did give us that edge. I remember ringing my sister and saying, Charlotte, we're failed. We're not going to qualify. And her saying, if someone had given you this result in Tokyo, it would have been the thing that had made us. And you will never realize quite how lucky you are to have this terrible result. And because she was my sister, I believed her. And thank God I did, because it did end up being that result. Finally, qualifying for the Olympics, becoming bronze medal winning crew. And in turn, like I said, I was the first mum from Team GB rowing to ever win a medal. I was also the first mum from Team GB in Paris to win a medal. Matthew Pinson called it a fairy tale, but to Becky and I, Sir Steve Redgrave summed it up better than anyone else. He said, no one gave Wilde and Hodgkins-Byrne a hope of the podium. Theirs was an Olympic story of graft and guts, to never give up and never let your dreams escape. That is why it's so special. It gives everyone hope. To me, it was simply a journey of putting my belief into everything, but accepting that fate and luck had made it possible. To me, Paris was simply the right place at the right time, and everything I achieved was due to the village of people supporting me and pushing me on when I did not feel I was able to do so. Just as I started at the beginning, I do largely have Reading University to thank for this. Without the understanding of my lecturers and the support in 2015, and without my degree, this would still be a dream, and I wouldn't be standing here this evening as a graduate of Reading University and a bronze medalist. So thank you very much.
we're going to have the opportunity to put some questions to you now. We're going to have a roving mic somewhere. Thank you so much. We're just going to come around to the audience. Just before we do that, we have got some pre-submitted questions that have come from the Women at Reading Network. So I'm going to start off with a couple of those where people start to think of their questions, and Ruth's going to wave at me whenever we get some questions that she's amassed from online as well. Very modern. Okay, so first question, Mathilda, how did you juggle training alongside studying and alongside motherhood?
So luckily I never had to do all three together, as I can 100% say I would have definitely failed. Like I said, my lowest result I ever had at the uni was in my first year when I tried to do a full-time degree and row, but ultimately I didn't communicate. I didn't tell the rowing coaches I was trying to do a chemistry degree and the contact hours I had, and I didn't tell the chemistry staff that I was trying to become an Olympian. I learned the hard way. I learned by nearly failing my first year. But I also learned that if you actually have the conversations that you think are going to be more challenging, it ultimately frees you up. And at least worst case, it gets everyone on the same page. Juggling motherhood and being an elite athlete, again was unknown. It wasn't something that had been done before. It wasn't something that had been done before. But I was determined if I couldn't do it, who else was going to be able to do it? And I quite like the idea of it being the first. My first year postpartum with Freddie was, to be honest, pretty carnage. I was determined to do it independently. So when I started back training, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd feed Freddie, we'd play a bit together, I'd put him down for a nap. And I was lucky that I had some equipment at home. So I'd jump on a bike, do a bike, watch him on the monitor, make sure he wasn't waking up, get off the bike, wake him up, shower, play with him, feed him, put him down for a nap, do my second session, wake him up, and then if I had a third session, we'd jump in the car and drive to Upper Thames. Looking back, I'm not entirely sure how I made it happen, but I wanted to return to being an Olympian, but I also really wanted to be Freddie's mum. I could have palmed him off on my mum. I could have passed him over to a childminder, but I'd had Freddie because I wanted to be his mum, not just because I wanted to tick the box that I'd given birth to a child. And though it was incredibly hectic and incredibly exhausting because my partner's in the army, he wasn't there all the time. So I was also doing the nights. I also chose to solely breastfeed him. So lots of things that maybe in hindsight, I did not set myself up in the easiest way. I have an incredibly close bond to him, and I obviously had the result from last summer. So would I change it? No, because it was possible in the end, but it wasn't without its challenges.
Mm-hmm. I think those of us that have had small babies are completely in awe. Those of us that struggle to get dressed to get out of the house are feeling quite a lot of envy for you at the moment. Obviously, this evening's event is in aid of women's history and thinking about you as a woman and an athlete. Are there particular things that you have to consider in terms of training as a woman?
So rowing being a semi-team sport, we don't adapt the training based on cycles or anything. We all do the same training. We are very fortunate in the fact that we train separately as men's and women's squads. So our program is written by the women's head coach, Andy, and we don't do the men's program. I don't think we'd also get the same results if we did the men's program. I think we do if you talk to any of the women and the men, we think the women do a harder program. I don't have the data on it, so I don't know whether that's actually true. Andy is known from running one of the most brutal training programs, and having done it, I definitely agree. But the adaptation comes in the weights programs. Our weights coach last year, I remember him saying he runs 17 different programs, and there'll be completely different exercises. Even the frequency with which people lift will be different. But without this, people wouldn't be robust and then ultimately wouldn't be the fastest athlete. So that's where that adaptation comes from. You can't change a crew session because otherwise you'd never have consistency. So having to do the same majority of the program was very important. It still is important. But being able to change the weight stuff we were very fortunate with that.
Are there differences in things like training gear and nutrition and those sorts of things? Or?
Not massively. As a rower, a woman will typically row in a lighter setting. So it means the oars will be slightly lighter, but that's just because obviously we're not as strong as men. So if they were set to the same gearing as a man, we'd probably struggle to get them through the water. There has been statements said before, we're not small men, we shouldn't train as small men, and I completely agree with that. And in the year leading into Tokyo, we were on the men's programme. I'm not saying that was the reason we didn't perform, but we're certainly thriving off Andy's programme as a result. Our boats, the shell is a bit different, but that's just because we're typically lighter than a man, but the minimum weight of the boat is the same. And dietary kind of varies athlete to athlete. So I'm assuming overall average, a man's calorie intake is bigger, but that's just because they're generally a bigger person. But then if you look in the women's team, there'll be a lot of variation between athletes, especially when you look at the lightweights who were 57 kilos. So by the time they got down to racing, they'd be on minimal food anyway.
And before I turn to you for your questions, just I'm particularly interested in your time here as a student as well, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about what your favourite things of being a student were, and did you manage to have some fun as well? Did you manage to fit that in?
Yeah, so for me, like I said, I was here for 5 years. I'm still in touch with lecturers from here. I'm still in touch with friends. I'm aware what a community I had here, and I think that's a really special thing. Obviously, because it took me 5 years, I went through various people graduating, and actually the people I'm friends with are people from my 3rd year. I think my final year was the year it clicked. And actually, ironically, it was the first time I got to the summer ball. Otherwise, I never got to anything because it always clashed with rowing. I remember going to lectures being like, I'm really sorry, but my exam date, I'm actually not even in the country for this. And that was another reason of why going part-time was so important. So we could actually juggle it around and I finally sit all my exams. I think being able to be part of this community has been really special for me.
Thank you. So I'm going to turn to you now to take some questions from our audience. If you've got your hand up, then we'll come to you with the mic.
I'd really like to know what's next for you, Martha. Are you going to use your chemistry degree?
So actually, I've been in contact with one of my old lecturers, and I've done some writing for her, but to be honest, that's the extent of my chemistry degree so far. I know I love the problem-solving aspect of it, and I'm now looking at jobs, and it's transferable skills that I got from my chemistry degree that so far I think I'm going to be using to take forwards. Much as I'd love to go into something more sciencey, because of Freddie and my partner's job, I don't have the capacity to go and study again. So I'm aware that that's my kind of luck of the draw and the fate I've got with it. But yeah, I will definitely be going something more numerical. Would be my aim and my hope.
It's really interesting to hear about games from an athlete's perspective, so thank you for that. I was amazed when you said about, is it the European qualifiers jumping from 7th to 2nd? How does that happen? If all teams are sort of giving it their all, what do you put it down to making that leap?
So when Becky and I first went in a double, we're very lucky in the GB rowing team that we do pieces every week. And when we were first testing it out, we were actually topping the sheet. And I think that was probably more reflective of our true performance, certainly the result we got of in the end. I think Europeans were a blip. It was Becky's first senior international competition. It was my first competition returning post-Tokyo. And I remember sitting there and being so nervous, I was pretty much paralysed. And post-Europeans, Becky was like, what was wrong with you? You were throwing me. I was like, I actually couldn't function. I was so nervous. So I think partly that, but I think the lack of preparation really did throw us. You go into a race and you do it fast, we call it free rate. So there's no cap on it. Whereas we'd only done stuff to rate 28. So we'd done like medium-ish intensity pieces, and that had been it. We'd also, for Europeans, we'd got in our racing shell. But subsequently, having come back from Europeans, we realised we really didn't like this boat. And actually, we went back to our training hull, which was the boat we'd originally used. So I think for me, there was quite a lot of factors. One, probably just blowing out nerves in the first place. Two, we did actually change our boat. So yeah, us and the lightweights, neither of us used the Olympic boats in the end because both boats disliked them. But also just more experience. And actually, out of all those crews there, only one of them qualified because I think the others got too confident on their performance, whereas we were backed so much into a corner. At that point, you have literally nothing to lose. So you either give up or you take those jumps and those risks that you never normally would make, because why would you? Why would you make this massive risk that could cost you everything? But if you have nothing, it doesn't matter. And because of that, our communication got better. We were reviewing everything on a day-to-day basis, but we had complete purpose because we knew where we were and we knew where we needed to go to. So suddenly the trajectory was kind of easy to see, and every day we could see whether we were chipping away with it or not. So I think that was a big learning curve for us.
What was your favourite and least favourite erg?
2K. Probably 2K or 30 minutes. Tom will probably say 30 minutes because when I was at Hartbury, so a 30-minute erg is literally 30 minutes and you do it at rate 20. But I became absolutely convinced that unless I broke 2 minutes as the average split, he was going to cut me from the team. So I'd get a minute, we do them every week, and I'd get a minute and a half from the end and then get so nervous I'd make myself sick. And I distinctly remember it got to a point where he'd like put a bucket behind my ear because he got so fed up with cleaning behind me. So like it took me a stupidly long time to be like, oh, he's not going to cut me, because this was never selection criteria. Equally a 2K. My strength is not an erg. I have horrendous technique. And I'm probably the second or third slowest in the team. So I think because of that, you automatically put pressure on yourself that if you know it's not your strength, you know that therefore a bad performance is going to be absolutely terrible. And to be honest, the 2K became a really big thing for me because returning from Freddie, I was told I had to PB it. And I hadn't PB'd it in 7 years, not having had a baby. So how on earth was I going to do it having had a baby? So it became like a big stigma. And I was also like, but it's my weakest thing. Why are you going to cut me or not based off this? And I remember December trials, I did it, and I think I was 7 seconds off my PB. So this was the slowest I'd gone in like 10 years. And the coach coming over to me and be like, God, you've left yourself a lot of work for tomorrow with the water trial. And be like, yeah, thanks, Andy, great. And luckily I like scraped it back. But I think that made me realize that actually, even if you're really terrible, like he wasn't going to cut me. And luckily I was always going to be selected off water performances. But yeah, now 2K, but initially 30 minutes.
Hi, what would you say to younger girls who aspire to take sports further but feel like they maybe can't because of their gender?
I honestly don't think gender has anything to do with it. I think I've been part of the team where there's been these massive girls who should have performed at everything. I think if you have that mindset and that shit that you can do it, don't let anyone tell you you can't. Like, it's your story and it's your journey. Like, just because someone tells you can't doesn't mean you can't. And I think that belief in yourself, as me as an elite athlete and watching so many people come into the team and not make it was the ones of us that went, well, why not? Why can't I do it? And it might have meant that you have really challenging conversations, and it is, to be honest, really quite unpleasant at times. But ultimately, when you sit on the start line, the coach and the other people that tell you can't, they can't touch you. And when you realise that actually, if you don't do it, you're just going to let yourself down. And then you're like, well, why would I let myself down? I believe I can. So of course I'm going to go and do it. So that would be my thing. If you believe you can do it, don't let anyone tell you you can't.
Can I just ask you a follow-up on that? Because clearly your belief in yourself has been really important. And you've been very positive in all that you've said. But were there people, particularly when you came back after Freddie, that doubted you?
Yes, absolutely. And to be honest, when I first started rowing, I beat quite a lot of the men's squad, and it didn't go down very well. And at that point, like, there was quite a lot of really quite unpleasant comments coming my way, and it probably would be classified as bullying. And I guess at that point, I had a chip on my shoulder because, and it probably wasn't the right way, but if I stopped, they were going to win, and I didn't want them to win. So I was that awkward. To be honest, my mum used to tell me, like, Mathilda, are you sure you don't want to go for a little run? Like, I wasn't athletic, but I was clearly quite fast. And that was that was the start of it. And then, yeah, when I went in to tell the coaches I was pregnant, they thought I was going in to tell them I was quitting. And certainly when I was first coming back, I do think a lot of people thought either it would become too much for me and I wouldn't do it, or I decided that I want to be a full-time mum. But equally, like, then it wasn't a known path. So we, like, me coming back, we really were figuring out every obstacle. I definitely was a guinea pig. And yeah, when I remember in the summer watching the Women's 8 in Paris, the CEO coming over to me and congratulating me and saying that we didn't expect this to happen. And that in itself was, I really respected him for coming and saying it to me. And yeah, if it inspires anyone else to, not just in sport, not just in rowing, but having a child shouldn't end your career. It shouldn't stop you doing what you want to do. It certainly makes it trickier, but if you have the people around you, and yes, I should have been better at asking them for help, but people do actually want to help quite a lot, and they do make it possible.
Can I ask you something I just really want to know? Your sister is a rower as well. She rows, is that right?
She used to, yeah.
She used to. And clearly, by the nature of what you do, you're quite competitive. I just wondered what the dynamic there is. And also, you know, the relationship between you and Becky as well. It'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about both of those.
Yeah, so my sister actually started rowing first, and then because we can't have it that one of us is doing something, the other one's not, I followed 2 weeks later. And yeah, so very irritatingly, I won the double as an under 23 in 2016. And then in 2018, she won it. And because the conditions were right, she now holds the world record. So we there has been like a lot of things where we followed each other. And I know my boat did the same time in training, but if you look on the world record site, she holds it. I really don't. My time was terrible because it was a massive headwind. So yeah, we've always been competitive against each other, and we've been really close, fought really close again. And to have her in Tokyo, especially when it all went wrong, I can't ever put into words how grateful I was to have her there, and she will equally say the same. And yeah, when I became pregnant, she transitioned to cycling, and she's now cycling and being a director of sales and strategy in another company, because why do one thing when you can do two? My mum's not sporty, and definitely was a shock. And my mum will hate me for saying this, but I remember her saying, but you won't play in an orchestra and you might look funny in an evening dress, because she was terrified I was going to become this like bodybuilder of some sort. So I think she's been consoled that neither of us are now. So yeah, we've always been competitive. And I think it's probably only now that I can turn to her when I want advice, and equally she can turn to me. And I think because we've been through so many shared life experiences, I really value her input. And equally, yes, she doesn't have a child, but she's got the career. So we're both always looking to each other for advice. And yeah, with Becky, it was a different partnership. When she joined in 23, we went on training camp, and she was left behind with the people that weren't part of the team, and she was seat racing to become the spare in the team. And I remember the first time I got on a crew boat with her, I'm thinking, what on earth is this girl doing in front of me? Because she technically wasn't there, but mentally she really was. And within that training camp, she'd gone from this girl kind of wobbling around in front of me in a quad to we jumped in a double, and we somehow won the set of pieces. I remember Andy being like, oh, the scullers are doing well today. So it did click very early on. But Becky and I, we were always able in the double to let each other be ourselves. Neither of us was trying to become a person that we weren't. And equally, neither of us were trying to micromanage or kind of anticipate a problem the other one might have. And I think that in itself was so crucial for our double surviving and thriving. Yeah, we had a thing before in rowing, I'm assuming it's in lots of different levels of rowing. You have a race schedule. So you have your start time, and then you work backwards when you're going to warm up, last pee break, when you're going to eat, and this and that. And literally on it would have Mathilda's stupid chat with Tom. When I get nervous, I come out with the most random of things. And she's like, but Mathilda, this is 3 weeks away. I need to stay present. So me understanding that Becky wasn't the person who had been at qualifiers talking to her about a training camp. She's like, we might not even get there. But I just needed to know life was going to carry on, and she just needed to know I was here and now. So we offloaded that to Tom. And I think because it was a project that was selected in March to try and qualify in a couple of months to then go to the Olympics 3 months later, we had to have those conversations very early. We didn't have the 4 years where we could forge this relationship, mess it up, get it back together. We had to kind of do everything together. And I'm very lucky that she actually likes children, and Freddie absolutely adores her. So I think she then had the understanding of when I said, oh my God, Israel's bombed Iran, my partner's gone into work. And she was like, oh, okay, we'll train in the afternoon. She got it because I couldn't bring Freddie to the training session because he couldn't sit in the boat, which I can't ever thank her enough for that, because she understood that I was going to be pulled in both directions. And again, it let me be mum to Freddie, but it also let me be the athlete. And yeah, we're still really good friends now.
I think we have a question in the middle there.
You said that it was only sort of in your 5th year of being a student here that the student athleting was finally clicked. For a lot of us, we won't have the opportunity to be here for 5 years, but we might be here for 3 or 4, so we might just miss that clicking stage. But what was it about that 5th year or the years leading up to it that really helped you become a student athlete? Do you have any words of wisdom for us student rowers or athletes?
I think I realised I was letting myself down. If you try, for me, chemistry, if you try revising an entire module the night before an exam, you're going to open the paper the next day and not understand even what the question means. You're not even going to understand the words. And this was the situation I was getting in. And I also realised that the excuses and using rowing as an excuse, ultimately, like, I know the lecturers did care that I was doing well, but what grade I got wasn't going to be on their CV or anything. It was just going to be on mine. And I realized actually that by doing the revision earlier, one, I really enjoyed my subject because finally I started understanding it, but also then it took the pressure off rowing. Whereas if I backed off my studies, ultimately I was going to try and have to revise everything while I was trying to race in the summer. Like, you're rowing now, if you leave everything to around April trials and testing, and bucks, like, trying to revise at bucks never works. Believe me, I've tried it. Literally doesn't happen. And the coach is too dark. You also can't revise on it. And that was like how I tried to do it in my first year. Oh, I've got a weekend away. Let's revise. No, I didn't even open the books. So I think when I finally realized ultimately the only person I was letting down was myself. And yes, there's many evenings where you go, oh, I'm too tired, I'll do it tomorrow. But tomorrow you're always still too tired. So once you realize that you're never going to have that perfect situation, but the day when you get that exam result of your final grade is coming sooner and sooner, like, that was what made me back it up. So yes, I had 5 years, but had I had 3, I would have realized I was graduating in 3 years and I had to put everything together. I think I also remember sitting in one of the rooms over there and realizing that my 3rd year actually counted for a lot more and I could pull my grade back up. And I think that changed my mentality of, oh, I've already failed. What's the point, to being like, well, actually, I can grab a lot more marks and I can really pull this grade back up. So it gave me the encouragement I needed that there was still time and I could still turn it around.
If there is there, oh, okay.
Hiya. It's wonderful to hear about your journey, and it sounds like Freddie's been a big part of that leading up to the Olympics. What did it mean to you? I mean, it sounds like a juggle, understandably. What did it mean to you to have him there as part of that journey, to be watching you win?
To be honest, I'm not sure how much emotionally, I'm not sure how well I would have coped without him there. I was very fortunate that he could come on training camps. So I was already able to give a perspective on actually rowing wasn't everything. Whereas I think rowing, like with the studies, is very easy to become everything and become so all-consuming that you're not even aware what's going on with the world. Whereas I'd realised the years I performed best in rowing were actually the years where I'd concentrated on my degree. And by having Freddie there, I was really lucky at the Olympics. He stayed 5 minutes away from where I was staying. So in the 10 minutes I got between meetings and video analysis and everything, he'd come over. And it was the only time where I could switch off from rowing, because the couple of days where I got like an hour and we'd go to the park and I'd have to be sitting next to him pretending I was driving this truck. You get drawn into that innocence, and he doesn't know how I'm doing. He would realize how stressed I was. And because of that, I had to stop being stressed. I think also when I left Tokyo, I was left with, well, what now? Everything I'd aimed for had disappeared in front of me. Whereas whatever happened in Paris, I was going to wake up the next day and he was going to yell at me that he wanted a snack, or he was still going to tell me he still didn't want to go to bed. And I think knowing that the world carries on around you, no matter how intense what you're currently doing might feel, is really important. Or certainly it was for me, because I might not have had the identity of this decorated Olympian, but I was still going to be his mum. And being a good mum to Freddie was ultimately more important to me than my rowing career. And it still is. Like, I'll have him for the rest of my life. But already, like, that was the thing with the Olympics. We got a medal on the Thursday, but by Friday, we were already yesterday's news as other people have won medals. And I think that perspective that it gave me, that actually this was really important and I deeply cared about it. But Freddie was still going to be my child for another 16 years, and then he'd be my adult son. That made me realise that there was not more to life, and this didn't count, but it was a part of me rather than the entirety of me.
This better not be a hard chemistry question.
Question. I just wanted to ask you sort of something about what's happened sort of since Paris, in terms of, I think you've done something incredibly special and something unique actually in having Freddie and then winning a medal. And I sort of expected to see perhaps more publicity about that in the press and other places. And you made the little comment about yesterday's news, but I'm surprised not to have seen a bit more. I mean, I know you're naturally a modest person of all your achievements. I think that's very true. But as I say, I think what you've done is really special. I think it would perhaps be nice to see a bit more recognition of that externally. I don't know what you feel.
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know whether it corresponds to the sport I'm in. Rowing's not typically a high-profile sport, and though I was the first, there were 9 other mothers that went on to win medals. To be honest, I still think mothers are a minority in it, and it's not the norm to be a mum and be an elite sport. So I don't know whether it's more a taboo thing, and I'm very conscious that when I speak, I don't want to alienate other mums. Like, just because I've gone and succeeded in rowing, someone else will go and succeed as a lawyer, as a doctor, as any other job, and we are actually all the same. In our media conference afterwards, the Kiwis, who both of them were also mums, said, well, to my daughter, I'm mum. Mum goes to work. And I think that's really important. And I do agree. I think there should be more in the media of it. But I'm not sure, maybe it's a country or maybe the media, how much they're ready for it yet. Obviously, there wasn't really any coverage of any mums in Tokyo. And then there was more in Paris. But as a nation, and certainly talking to my peers who are also mums, like if the child's ill, we're always called, the dads aren't. I think like mum having a career and actually showcasing herself still potentially isn't the norm, or maybe that's just my semi-negative experience of it. So I think, it's a tricky balance of alienating mums who might feel that they're then inadequate, and they're absolutely not. Like, everyone has their own journey, everyone has their own story, but also where's the market for it yet with it, I think is a tricky balance of it.
So have you think about how to introduce your Olympic journey to Freddie when he growing up?
So I think Freddie has a very different picture of that. I don't know how much he'll ever remember. But for Freddie, like I've already said, he came on training camps with us. And I remember the first time I took him on a plane and there wasn't the team there. And I remember watching him and him being so thrown that there wasn't 40 other people that he knew around him all wearing the same kit, because he also used to turn up with his Team GB jumper as well. So he matched us entirely. And realizing actually he had no idea how unusual, but also how lucky he was that he thought that was the norm. Like the fact he ran around the gym, I still let him, maybe I'm a bit of a kamikaze parent, but he's always been part of it. But yeah, at home, I've got some photos from the summer up on the wall, and I said earlier, people who saw the medal, I was like, I'm not precious about it, because for me, when I got onto the podium, Freddie was handed down to me, and it's that memory that's is so much more valuable to me than my medal. But because I wasn't precious of it, the photos I've got of my medal are Freddie there with his steering wheel, driving, which is my medal, or they're whacking it on the floor, which I think if I'd been precious of it, I wouldn't have. And even now, if he sees the Eiffel Tower, he goes, Olympic Tower, or his water bottle, because we've got so much kit, is one of my Olympic ones, and it's known as Olympic Lion. Or when I first put some rowing kit on, he's like, I get my flag, I go cheer mummy, go Becky. And it's trying to keep these things in his vocabulary as long as possible. Like when he first starts saying it's the Eiffel Tower, I will be gutted, because that will be the sign that he's growing up and he understands it more, but he'll be losing those memories at the same time. So I think for me, I want him to know that as his mother, yes, I obviously can't do everything, but as a mum, you should feel like you can, and nothing should stop you. And if I inspire him to think that he can do whatever he puts his mind to, yes, he might not be great at it, but at least he can try. That's all I want to bring into him. And yes, my rowing journey ended in an Olympic medal, but ultimately it ended with me showing that I was that good. If as long as he puts his best into anything, that's all I can ask for him. So yeah, like I'm not precious about my rowing kit. I'm not precious about the medal, because I want them normalized to him. I don't want them on a pedestal to him where he feels it's untouchable and where he feels alienated for him. So that's my biggest goal with it, that he still, as long as possible, keeps that childish naivety and innocence with it.
I was lucky enough to get to go to the Olympics and the Paralympics last summer. It was so much fun as a spectator. Did you get to enjoy the vibe of the athlete village and all the shenanigans that we saw on Instagram?
So with rowing, it's very unusual to stay in the village. So we stay out because we were an hour and a half's drive, which for us, though you miss the Olympic village when you're competing, having gone into the Olympic village a couple of days before we started, and then for the closing ceremony, you realise how lucky you are. So yeah, post-competition, we were evicted from accommodation and we had to get our own accommodation. And for me, because I'd missed so much time with Freddie, I actually decided to come home. So I had a couple of nights post-competition where we were at the Team GB house, and inevitably we were line biking around Paris at God knows what hour in the morning, and then having to get Ubers back to our accommodation. But yeah, we were all able to go to the closing ceremony, that was really special, because it was the first time the entire team were back together. Admittedly, most of them with chest infections and COVID by this point. But yeah, I think being able to be separated from the village when you're competing enabled us to truly enjoy it for what it was, rather than if we'd been there while competing, we would have been quite stressed because of the long distance walks between our accommodation and the food, or the heat and the lack of aircon. So yeah, we were very lucky that we got the best of both worlds with it.
Seamlessly. Nobody noticed. I take the microphone.
Mathilda, there's one important bit of business we have to do to conclude this evening. As a university, we recognise outstanding achievement in our alumni through something called a Distinguished Fellowship Award, and we have one to give you this evening for your excellent achievement, your distinction, both in terms of rowing and as a role model to other women for what you've achieved as a woman and as a mother, and for embodying our values as a university. So Mathilda, I'm very proud, make sure I get it upside down, to present you a Distinguished Fellowship of the University. And I suspect we'll inspiring, wasn't it? Really inspiring and uplifting. So thank you very much to Mathilda for coming to join us this evening. Can I also offer thanks to Felicity and Anna, our signers for this evening. Thank you very much. To our colleagues in events and to the women at Reading, who played a really important part in organising this evening. So thank you all very much, and thank you to all of you for coming and joining us this evening. Thank you. Thank you.